Hi, guys and dolls. We're back again. It's Southern Belle Humanism, and I have with me a guest that I met online. He's now a Facebook buddy, Zach Law, and he has his own podcast channel called the Zachrilege Cast, and where he interviews atheists and just really awesome people, as he puts it. And I met Zach through a secular group of friends, and I've been on his podcast, so check it out. And I'm just going to give the floor to Zach Law and just tell us where do you want to begin? Grade school, college, wherever.
I don't know. It's as someone who's interviewed a ton of atheists, it seems like everybody else's story is more interesting in terms of making any kind of transformation. Because I just grew up nothing like my parents. We never went to church, never really did anything like that. So I don't think it was until maybe my 30s that I kind of started using the term, and then at a certain point, I started listening to podcasts. That's a mistake, everybody. You start listening, you can't stop. It's like potato chips.
Mm-hmm.
And the weird one was I actually listened to, it was Adam Carolla's show, and he went on this rant about religion and being an atheist. And it made me decide to look up atheists on iTunes, and I found like Atheist Experience and a few other shows. And eventually, through meeting some people, I took a guest spot on Barroom Atheist, and I was like, I think I can do this. So I just kind of started doing the show on YouTube at first, because sadly Google Hangouts are going away, but I think I'm still be able to record on there. You just hit a button and you're set, and that's everything. You just get a guest, you talk for an hour, you're done. That's kind of what I've been doing for the past, I don't know, year and a half. I just recorded episode 67 last night with Unbuckling the Bible Belt. They're from Nashville, the South in general. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. I don't know if there's. I always find the other person's story more interesting than mine, but maybe it's because it's my story. I kind of know it,
Mm-hmm.
but that's just. I don't know how I feel about the whole thing.
So basically, you grew up with agnostic parents that it was natural, just as natural as breathing, I guess.
Well, I guess this is where the story gets sort of interesting. Like in 2001, I got a staph infection. I ended up in a hospital for about 3 months, almost died. I was in a coma for about 3 weeks. And my parents came up during that time. And when I finally got out of the coma, my parents had the chaplain like in the room all the time. And we were like praying and stuff. And I was like, what is this all about? And oddly, this near death experience probably made me go further away from religion. And I think it brought my parents back. So they are
Wow.
now members of a Catholic church, although I consider it a pretty, it's a pretty, it's a liberal version. Like they had
Oh, okay.
a pastor, a priest who didn't believe in hell and, was pro LGBT. And I almost think it's like their social circle now, but I just think it was such a traumatic experience that they had to grab onto something. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what was there. Like the chaplain just happened to be there.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That was, you see what happens in traumatic experiences, what it does to people, and it's a different experience for every person. So over time, I just was like, I had that point where I was kind of hallucinating, and I thought I was about to die, and then I realized there wasn't anything there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I was hallucinating. So usually, when you hallucinate, people who are
Yeah.
religious see Jesus, and people who aren't kind of see that once you die, you're kind of done. So that was my thought, and I'm like, okay, that's what it is. Let's do what we can with life, and that's kind of how I've been since.
Hmm.
15 years, actually.
And that's interesting that your parents. So I guess did they have Catholicism in their background? Because as I said on my show, my husband and I, we grew up Catholic. Or was that just something because you said that chaplain happened to be there? Was it just the type of chaplain?
No, they actually. It's odd. My parents grew up Catholic, but in like the 60s, they were the two different kinds of Catholic. My mind,
Mm-hmm.
it was like Western Orthodox versus Eastern Orthodox. I think that was one reason why my mom had to like forge her parents' signature when they got married, because they were 20 and you had to be 21
Wow.
to get legally married in like 1969, I think 1970. Anyway, so it was how they were both kind of raised. and I'm still not sure the story of like how they kind of came back. I think maybe my dad was the one who pushed for it, and they kind of joined a church, and they've already moved on to a different church. I do find that with people who are Christian of any kind, like they'll kind of move around with the different churches. They don't get to. I think it's more about the people you're with than maybe the faith itself. But that's a person to person kind of situation.
Yeah, yeah. And I have to add, you're drinking red wine. And when I was on your show, we talked about beer brewing. You also
I'm drinking
homebrew as
this
well.
Maduro. It's brown ale from Cigar City.
Oh, it is a brown ale. I thought you were
Mm-hmm.
drinking wine. Okay, hold that
Yeah,
up
this is
again.
like my Omegang glass, so it looks, it's
Oh
very
yeah.
chalice-like. Blood of my enemies kind of thing. But
Cool. Very neat. Okay, well, I just have coffee right now. I'm drinking decaf though, but it's in a Sheshi cat mug. So there you go.
and I see the
The cat.
cats behind
Oh
you.
yeah, you'll see all sorts of cats.
Anytime I talk to anybody who has a cat,
Yeah.
that cat's
And
going to come in and say, "By the way, this is my house." Continue as you were, but it's my house.
yeah. So, and you're also a big fan of cats. Is it just cats or animals in general? And how did the whole, I know many animal lovers usually find their way to some sort of spirituality that really embraces animals or agnosticism or atheism or something like that. Is that sort of, and I know you've always been agnostic, or atheist, but is that sort of a factor in your philosophy, including atheism, like the baby animals?
Well, growing up, we had pets, and it was just like my parents kind of switched from being cat people to dog people. I think we just had cats because my brother and I wanted them. And we actually moved once, and we had this cat that was a yard cat that became an indoor cat. And then my mom conveniently forgot to take the cat to the next location we lived at. So once we moved out, they became dog people 100%. And I didn't really think about pets at all until I met my wife, and she had 2 cats at the time. And, we've lost 3 over the years. And then we kind of adopted this duo, these 2 brothers last summer. And they have become our lives now. And there's one hiding under the bed over here. It's funny that the last cats I had were like jumping on me during a show. Like they wanted to be on the camera. And these guys, if I put them on the camera, they're like, no, we want to come into your lap when we're ready. And if you grab us, no, it's not happening. So they're oddly not afraid of people, but they're kind of camera shy. They probably want their own show. That's my guess.
That's funny. Yeah, my cats are always around depending on where I am located in the house and what computer's working. So there's been a little bit of like out there in the ether, like people, there's always a debate with religious people about whether atheism is a religion or not. And I find that I prefer the dictionary definition where, a is just a prefix and it means atheist basically means without or lacking, without a religion and lacking a God. That's just the very dictionary definition of what atheist is and what atheism would just be without religion. So how do you embrace that word, or how do you use that word? Are you just like me, like the bottom line, just the basic dictionary definition, or are you someone maybe that does take it as a movement, and what sort of movement? Because I know there's a lot of talk back and forth about different types of atheists. There's new atheists, there's atheism plus, and I didn't even realize this till early last year, that I just thought being an atheist was like, okay, I just, whatever, I'm without a God, and I thought being a new atheist is just being outspoken about that and owning it and just being, yeah, this is what I do and am. I just stay in bed on Sundays or do yoga. I don't go and sit with a group of people. So how do you, how is atheism a part of your life, and how do you embrace that word, or do you, to what extent?
I don't know if I always embrace it because I'm still kind of half in the closet. Like I don't really mind if someone tags me when I do a show with them on Facebook, but I don't really post it there. I have my own separate page for my show. So it's not open. So it's a word that sometimes come off, you get the cultural kind of feel like, oh, it's got this negative connotation. So you feel like, oh, it's something I need to hide. Obviously I don't really think that's the case. And I don't think it's a religion, although religion kind of sets the pace for everything else. So you see things like Sunday assembly and people trying to get together. Like there are local atheist groups that get together, and religions can say, well, that's the same thing. It's like, well, we're not really worshiping anything, but I don't know, maybe some people are. But I just take the term as being, not someone who believes in God. And then you got to really quickly find something that you have in common with other people. Because if it's just this one thing, it's probably not going to get you very far unless you're in kind of like a recovering from religion group where you're going through similar experiences that other people have had. I mean, I have to transfer over to like football or beer, some other subject that I have in common with the other person. Or, of course, doing the podcasting. There's a bit of a podcasting community as well. But we're all over the map, as you probably know. If you dip your toe in, you realize, oh yeah, there's a ton of people involved, and some of them aren't the nicest people in the world, and some of them are just really great, and that's kind of the way everybody is.
Yeah, exactly. And that's amazing to me because I guess the reason that I sort of kind of embraced the word atheism or atheist is because I'm educated, and I'm married to a physicist, so I'm married to science, and we've both caught a lot of bullshit for not being religious. And just even before, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to embrace the term atheist. I've always thought of myself as a spiritual person too, and as a humanist and all that jazz. But it's interesting. Do you think a lot of the negativity toward atheism may be warranted coming from some of the extremes that we've seen? Or do you think it's going to be there regardless for a very long time because this country is steeped in Puritanism, really?
Well, that is the ultimate question. Like the people are against, they say social justice warriors or against feminism or against atheism are usually not talking about the normal, whatever normal is, person who takes that label on. It's usually based on the extreme. Although I do notice, as you mentioned earlier, the religious people trying to compare atheism to religion. And it's almost like, well, at best, you're just as bad as we are. So I don't really get that kind of argument.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's almost like the LGBT movement, like the thing that made it come out and become more mainstream is like people go, oh, I hate gay people. Then it's like, wait a second, my neighbor's gay. Huh? I like this person. I didn't know they were gay. Now that I do, it's like, do you think they're different because you know this one thing about them? And that's kind of what has to happen with atheism. But there's been some quality infighting going lately, and people will probably pick up on that. And I don't know, even at this point, like the term New Atheist and Atheism Plus, just I don't know, that just has such negative attachments because it's we had the conversation when I interviewed you about intersectionality, where you end up trying to grab other things and put it onto atheism, and not just say, hey, I'm involved in these 4 things, but now everybody in the movement has to be involved in it as well, and it is good because I say it is. That's not going to lead people to feel warm and fuzzy. So it becomes, I don't know, just ends up like that's just who I am. But there are some negative things you have to deal with, like when the Chapel Hill shooter, that guy was an atheist. I think he was a little bit insane, and that's usually what happens with the single shooters. But he was an atheist. You have to at least acknowledge that's the case. You have something in common. Do you have to apologize? And for that, I don't know what level you're supposed to do that when you accept a label.
Yeah, that's why I'm very careful, and I pull back really fast when I realize, atheists basically being without religion is just only one very small aspect of my life, which is why I rebranded the channel to Humanism, because I really was more interested in human rights issues, as you know, that's going on here in my home state and our region. So it didn't make any sense, even though I had friends at the time that said, well, make it atheism, but that doesn't make any sense. So I've become very, very careful and very aware of a lot of the stuff that's put upon atheism, even more so than I was before, because here in Alabama, if you don't go online and you don't know about any of that, atheism is just equated with being a Satanist or something. That's still how silly it is. So unless you know about all this stuff and, talking about like saying the word intersectionality, I've heard intersectionalism too. I think they keep changing the name of that, but that just sounds like part of the interstate to people in Alabama, or either something vulgar. Like they don't know what intersectionality is. So I agree with you that, you know, I just stepping back from that and sort of not being associated with all that can be a freeing, I think, to go ahead and just be yourself. So, and what other things do you do, since we're just talking about you, what other things do you do just besides being an atheist? And has anyone ever discovered that you're secular, and have you gotten any sort of flack or backlash for that?
Well, I kind of started my whole interview quote unquote career because I also do like fantasy football. So
Mhm.
I interviewed a lot of fantasy football experts or people who are into it. And I did a meetup once in Seattle because you meet people through Twitter or Facebook. And as we were leaving, one of the guys is like, "Hey, I saw one of your posts about atheism, and I'm an atheist too, and I didn't know anybody else." And it was kind of cool to have that connection. I'm usually not the first person to tell anybody. I'll let somebody else go first when it comes to that.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, okay, we can talk about this," because I don't. I guess I'm super sensitive about getting in people's faces because
Mhm.
that's not
Mhm.
who I am. Like, if you don't want to talk about it, great. We
Yeah.
won't talk
See.
about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me
And
tell you about my friend nobody or me. God is
mhm.
me. You could be God too, or however people say.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm the same way. You know, I was raised that you don't talk about religion, politics, or money. You just in mixed company. That's just rude. And it's amazing how many people were not raised with that. So yeah, no, I'm the same way
I
you
don't know. Is
are.
that a? But in the South, there's just assumption that there is religion, and if you're meeting and you're going to have a meal, usually someone's going to say a prayer. I mean, I guess it depends on the company you're
Yeah.
with.
What do you do when that happens? Because I just don't go along with it. I just sit there and start eating. I mean, honestly.
Well, this is the thing you can do is when people like bow their heads, I just like keep my eyes open and see who else has their eyes open, and you kind of like have that look like aha, not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't really happen that much. I mean, yeah, the football thing. I mean, I've become obviously quite a beer
Hmm. Hmm.
connoisseur.
That's
I
cool.
just I just have a big fan. I had a friend who lived in Houston, and he mailed me some beer, so I had the experience of sending it to him and just trying stuff that's from different parts of the country. But really, the whole beer community is just blowing up. There's so much available. Even though Georgia is like one of the most backward states when it comes to beer laws, like you can't buy beer at a brewery because the distributors like own our state house. You have to do a tour, and it's just like it makes it harder, even though they keep popping up every week. They're new places, but it's kind of frustrating, but it's fun to you find somebody who has that interest with you. Like I had a friend who's a big beer guy, and he was just like opening all this stuff for me, and it was great because it's like, oh cool, I get to try all this new stuff and see what I like.
So is it just beer, or do you like? My husband likes Scotch. Do you like Scotch? Do you
I
like wine?
haven't got into the heavy stuff yet. Like occasionally I have like a bourbon barrel aged
Hmm.
beer that's kind of a higher alcohol, but even that you can kind of taste it. I drink wine, though. I'm like a wine, like most people are like beer. I'd probably drink like two different kinds that I know in the store. Someone's like, I've been a bud man my whole life, and that's what I'm going to drink. And like when it comes to wine, I usually just drink one or two different kinds. With beer, I'm super snooty, and if I come to somebody's house, I got to check their fridge. I might be judgy about somebody's beer. I'm not
Yeah.
really. I feel like I can teach you. You can come a long way with me.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I am with wine. Because I mean, I'm not a complete wine snob. Like I'm not one of those people that goes and spends like $20 for a bottle of wine. Because I don't have that kind of income. But but I don't like cheap wine, like pool wine or what they call white trash wine. Like boxed
Hmm.
wine. I can't stand that shit.
Buck Chuck or something.
Yeah, I mean that's gross.
I used
Oh
to
yeah.
actually get like a case and bring it up to
Hmm.
Nashville to my parents because they didn't really care. Although they're like me, they're in the 8 to 10 bottle kind of range, which is good. So when I come
Yeah,
up to
yeah.
their place, they usually have a pretty good selection of stuff. That's their only vice, really. They've been super exercise. They eat really well, but they have to
Hmm.
have their wine. That's very important. I think it's like if this is important to you, then you should set aside something for it. Spend a little more if you can. Or like you become a better wine aficionado, you can probably find the good stuff that's cheaper.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So that's even better.
Do you find that there is talking about wine and what people consider vices and everything is funny? Do you find that there's like a correlation between people who tend to be more free spirited that and enjoy a good bottle of wine, or I don't know, maybe do something positive with their time, whether it's volunteering or exercise of choice, in my case, yoga. Do you find that those people tend to be more either atheistic or agnostic or like the free spirits out there?
I'm not sure in general, although I know it does require a little bit of liquid enticement if you're going to play a game like Cards Against Humanity. Then you're going to get to know your friends a little better. I do know that the one conference I went to, ReasonCon in Hickory, North Carolina, there were some people doing some beverage consuming, so I don't know. But it can loosen people up, and then it can bring out people's true personalities, which sometimes can be a bit of a negative thing. And then you
Yeah.
find out, it's like you find out the people who, when they drink, either they kind of keep the same personality, or you may like them a little bit better. Then you go, oh, these are people I probably can hang out with. So I hope
Yeah,
I'm not like,
true
yeah,
that.
worse. If you get worse or bad parts of your personality come out, then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe this is bad.
I'm usually really introverted and kind of shy, but when I drink, I become the life of the party, and everyone likes
It
me
does happen.
a lot
Mm-hmm.
more. I'm like that person. I'm like, wow, we didn't know she had that much
It,
personality. I'm that person.
it does loosen the tongue. Maybe that's why
Yeah,
most of the
yeah,
interviews I've
exactly.
done, I usually have a beer with me, and I usually encourage people to drink. And
Hmm.
if I'm doing my show and I'm asking people about their show, I ask, first of all, do they drink during the show? And do they encourage people to drink while
Oh yeah,
listening to their show, as long as they're not operating a motor vehicle? So that's pretty
yeah,
much it. Are you going along with them?
yeah. That's us too. That's what I do. So, what would you like to see happen with secularism, atheism, just people like us in the future, other than just being accepted? And I mean, do you think that we'll actually, for instance, this whole election cycle that's going on now, and how do you think, other than just voting, I mean, is there a hope to really make an impact, or do we have a couple more generations to go?
Well, when it comes to like the presidential election, I feel like secularists have been kind of left on the side, and because we have this whole herding cats mentality, it's hard to like evangelicals, even though they're not really as united as people think, but they
Mm-hmm.
do go to vote, and they usually vote in blocks for a candidate. And I think it was 4 years ago, the Democratic platform like didn't have God, and everybody just got in an uproar, and they had to add God back. And this time they way overcompensated by like singing hymns and all that kind of stuff. So it does seem the mainstream politics have pretty much given up, but this cycle is horrible for everybody pretty much. I do like seeing stories of people who are like secular running in kind of smaller,
Mm-hmm.
uh, at least running for like city council or something like
Yes,
that, because that's
yes.
how it's going to eventually make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Is you can get somebody in government when they always seem to like to pray before the meetings and maybe have one
Mm-hmm.
person go, maybe not. Then there is a chance. I like seeing, like you said, atheism is kind of a negative, or what are the positive things people are doing? Like there's a group that's local to here, Foundation Beyond Belief, and they're actually sending people out to all the floods in Louisiana. A show like Dogma Debate, they are doing the I Am Fourth Fund. So they're actually donating money to people like kids who might be getting kicked out of their house by their families, and doing things to help people, and knowing like when someone comes out and has trouble with a family or a loved one or something, they know there are people out there to support them, because all I'm doing at this point is supporting people by saying, hey, there are other shows out there you could listen to. Like
Mm-hmm.
in terms of action, I haven't really found what if I'm going to have this cause, like what that cause will be, other than just talking every week. So maybe over time, something will click.
Well, I think by doing that, you're just giving people an outlet. You're giving people a platform, which is a great thing to do. That's one of the reasons why I started this, is because we had the whole human rights violations going on here in Alabama with adoption, trafficking, and women's health care. And Alabama is currently the worst state now to be a female in. So I've started that, but I also had a lot of guy friends who were, ironically, guy friends who were authors. And I'm like, I could put them on here too, and I could promote their books.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to be able to do that for people, and give them something to say, hey, look here. Just it I think that's a noble thing that you're doing. I was going through for your list of guests, and you're giving a lot of people a voice. And do you want to talk about some of the guests that you've had on, like your favorite guest? And you said 67 shows
Like
so
my
far?
favorite children? Is that what you're trying to do? Oh, wait, I have 2 cats. I don't have kids. So yeah, that's all right. I don't know. I mean, it's the one thing that's been a parallel for me, like talking about fantasy football and talking about atheism, is that pretty much everybody you ask to be on the show will say yes unless they don't see your message or they don't hear you. Like, nobody is too big time, and it's not like I've interviewed massive. I mean, I think Scathing Atheist was probably the biggest in terms of like audience, because they have, I think, hundreds of thousands of people listening to them. So, I mean, really, it started like I was going to just talk about podcasts. I was going to talk about No Religion Required, and then I got in touch with Bobby C., who helped set this show up and still supports it. And he's like, well, why don't you just interview me? So that's really how the interview part started. And then just because it's a solo show, or once in a while I go, oh yeah, I forget, I need to ask somebody to do an interview. And people are usually good about it, but occasionally I'll have to miss a week or two because of that. So it's been, I don't know, it's been really cool. I got to talk to a local member of the Secular Therapist Project,
Wow.
Dr. Jill. It was episode 8, because I went to a local meeting and she talked about being a therapist and talking about people who had dealt with religious trauma, which is, a legitimate thing. And people like coming out of a religious cult. And it is fun. I mean, I do enjoy talking to people who have the giant audience and have done 30 podcasts, but occasionally it's fun to get people who either haven't done a show or haven't done very many, just to kind of talk. Mm-hmm. I had my first, I would say, crossover episode a few episodes ago. I talked to a friend of mine, Matt Riddle, who's a pastor. And I talked to him a long time ago in terms of being a fantasy football expert. And then I'm like, hey, you're a pastor. This is my first, probably second Christian interviewee. So it was good to talk. And I think we should probably try to do it again, just to hear somebody on the other side who is also trying to make humanity better and didn't seem to be on the crazy side of things, just thought this was his calling.
Yeah, and it's interesting because recently I came to the realization, of course I knew this to some extent, that a lot of the people who tend to be just more live and let live, for lack of a better term, some of them were more my conservative friends, some very conservative, like people that go to church every Sunday, Baptist, and just very odd that I wouldn't have expected, for the last few years, that I've just haven't really cared who knows what and just lived my life. I've been pleasantly surprised that a few of them have actually been very conservative people. And have you found that, or is that just me because I'm in Alabama and everyone here is conservative anyway, just about?
Yeah, I guess that's the default setting there.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people, I guess when you start your podcast listening career on like the atheist experience, where it turns into these debates and people are really kind of yelling at each other, you think that's how all discourse is. And sometimes it can be that way, but I want to be able to have a conversation with somebody. I'm not going to say you're like wrong and terrible and bad, and I may think that, but really it's just like I want to know how people think, because when you hear somebody's a Christian, I feel like I have 10 more questions before I even start to know what that actually means. Because like, what denomination are you? How serious do you go all the time? Is it just a convenient thing because you want to be, I say like, most atheist podcasters are white and male. Well, if you say you're a Christian in this country, you're automatically a white male in a way, and you get that default like boost to your social standing. But then like what else does that mean? And I kind of want to make sure that it can be a little more diverse, since white male here, try to get as many female speakers as possible. When I got to talk to Anaya, who's the ex-Muslim, goes under Nice Mangoes, does polite conversations. Those are some interesting shows, because talking between ex-Muslims, that's like, sometimes as an ex-Muslim, you're actually treated the same as if you are still Muslim. Like you still have you can't scrub it off in a way.
Yeah.
And to hear somebody who has to be anonymous and stays anonymous, and I've probably had maybe 10 people I've interviewed have done the avatar where you don't see their face and they're not using their real name because they can't be out. And you want to be sensitive to that, but you also like, I want to hear your story and I want to be as safe as possible. But it's still out there, and sometimes it'll shock me to hear stories about people and their families and being like disowned and stuff. Because I went to this conference and then I told my mom, an atheist, she said, okay, still love you. Not sure if she told my dad. I'm sure he knows. But it kind of was like, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
And that's not a situation a lot of people deal with. So I kind of feel like I have a bit of a privileged position. So let's get to talk to the people who don't. And get their voice out a little more.
Yeah. And I guess my experience for the most part would be more like yours, because I never really got the whole Catholic thing. And, of course, when I just became a little bit more secular, I mean, shit, I'd already been practicing witchcraft since the age of 15. So my parents were like, oh, whatever. I mean, it was just another thing that Amber does. So, yeah. So I think that people like us are very fortunate, and especially being Southern, being in the South, we're rather fortunate that we've had more of that sort of response or non-response. So what do you think about, you mentioned the whole like people in the Islamic world like using avatars and stuff and having to be anonymous, and there's a lot of that on social media. Do you think that, granted, there are people that do need that, but people that don't necessarily need the anonymous picture or avatar or whatnot, do you think that does something in the conversation, like takes away, or maybe it gives people an excuse to act out? Or do you think that those of us who can be more open should be more open, basically? And how do we go about that?
Well, it's such a case-by-case basis. Like, if you're not dependent on parents or significant others, you can, but I mean, most states in the South, you're in a right-to-work state, which is the dumbest term ever, because it's basically they can fire you for any reason. So in theory, somebody could see a post I make online and decide, all right, I don't want to deal with this atheist, you're out. So I don't want to be harsh on anybody who isn't open. It's so hard to judge. I think we're just being so judgmental and kind of mean to each other on a surface level, because it's easier in the internet to do that. Then I don't want to go that way. But it does help more people who can come out, and for some people are being more brave than others.
Yeah, that
they're
is
risking
true.
their family. And in case of, I mean, it doesn't even have to be ex-Muslim to say you're risking your life, but that's often the case.
Yeah, it is.
It's not even like you're necessarily your family, although that's the main reason, but someone could track you down and just decide, all right, I'm going to make an example of this person. Because it's like you get a bonus in heaven if you kill an ex-believer or something, because you're technically like, that's the thing, like once you're a believer, well, in theory, they say you're born believing, so you can't leave. It's not Hotel California, but it's close. And then anybody who is against it needs to be killed, and that's kind of a scary situation that some people deal with.
Yeah, it is. I've seen that attitude, I guess, in evangelicals or fundamentalists not, oh, I'm going to kill you, but I'm going to take your children away and I'm going to sabotage your career or your job. As you said, a lot of people outside the South, they don't ever hear that terminology, right to work, and they don't understand that, where states where that's a thing, you can lose your job like that. So, and I see a lot of that sort of mentality, and that sort of really bigoted lashing out at people more when I was teaching at junior colleges, in small towns, around this area, the Birmingham area, and I would hear stories about students would tell me things that happened to them or family members, people getting threatened. I had a friend who was divorcing a very abusive husband, and they tried to use the fact that she didn't go to church in court against her. And this is someone who beat her up pretty bad in front of her children. And so it is still, like you said, still very courageous to be in the South and speak out. And I hope that, you doing your podcast definitely encourages people, and that's why I think it's important that you continue to interview just everyday average people as well as bigger people too. Do you have any formal training, by the way? Did you go to school for this? Because you're quite good.
Well, thanks. And no, I did go to journalism school, but I was in print and I never actually worked in journalism a day in my life. So, yeah, my wife had a microphone that she was using for doing some voiceover stuff. And so I kind of grabbed that, and then she just got this new one, which sounds pretty good. And the closer you get, it gets a little deep, but
Yeah.
I'll try. It's like you find the right position. I'm like, oh, I have to turn the fan off in here when I'm in the show, and I got the light on me, and I'm sweating like a pig, and I'm trying my best. But I think it's just, I don't want to go all Malcolm Gladwell, but I think the more experience you get, the better you get at interviewing. And really, for me, it's like, I'm going to ask the questions that will spotlight the person. I focused initially on podcasts, but obviously not everybody does podcasts. So it might be about the book, or it might just be like the time I interviewed Jim Dobler, who's a guy who lives in North Carolina, and he went to the conference and he's friends with lots of people, but we also got to talk about beer and stuff. So it didn't really matter to me because I never really thought like, oh, this is going to be a big thing. It's like, I get to talk freely with a person once a week, and it's pretty cool. And it's an excuse to get to talk to people who might not talk to me otherwise. So that's kind of fun, and get to kind of create my own community in a way, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people do on the internet anyway with social media. We're just all sort of creating our own little community. And another thing I wanted to ask you, when we were talking about friends that we have who are acquaintances who are of a different belief system, or they have a belief system or structure or something like that. And I found myself in this situation only very rarely, but when you're nice to them, or you will answer a question or two if they ask, but you still have that barrier, that boundary, but you're not mean when they realize that you're not a mean atheist, like so many are out there apparently on the internet. When they discover that you're not one of those, and they have this sort of wow moment where you're in their eyes a pretty cool person, um, and then it comes like they kind of passively try to convert you, like start talking, like asking, kind of begging the question, the whole begging the question thing. And how do you react in situations like that? Because it does happen to all of us, even the most mild atheist.
Every once in a while, it's like a group of friends we have, like they go to church. We actually went to their service once, and every once in a while it kind of pops up. I don't know if I'm like their token atheist friend. I don't know how that really works, but it hasn't been like this direct kind of attack and asking questions. I mean, I had a friend of my mom's, and this is before it really came out, like she's in the church with them, and I think they got her husband to join. It's so weird that my parents do this adult Catholic, like weekly teaching them how to be Catholic kind of thing, because I'm very interested to see what the curriculum is. Like Vacation Bible School for adults. But there's this friend, and she asked me straight up, like, when you were in your coma, did you see God? And I had to say no. And I didn't really go, I don't believe. I just left it at that.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see the disappointment. Like, surely you did, because that's what happens. Because that's what I've been told my whole life. That's my assumption. I didn't get any deeper. I don't know. Maybe it's like I get in interview mode, and I'm okay with asking questions, man. That's why I do this. Because like in normal conversations with people, I'm kind of shy, and I have trouble asking these questions that I feel like might be controversial and might make someone as uncomfortable as I would be if someone asked me the question. Although obviously I'm dying to talk about it as I'm doing it right now. I don't know. I haven't had too many of those confrontational moments
Mm-hmm.
with people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think all that, for me was very much in the past, like in my late 30s, especially, or mid to late 30s. I'm 38. That seems to be something going the way of the unicorn. It's like when you get in your late 30s, suddenly people stop fucking with you or something because I guess you're old or something like that. So I've noticed maybe it's the whole age thing. Do you see a difference? Oh, and basically, there are a lot of. There was a study that came out, and I forget, it wasn't Gallup, it may have been Gallup poll or something, but a friend of mine, Dan, wrote a blog about it because he writes this blog about atheism, and he curates atheism chat on Twitter, and he wrote a blog about some poll that basically talked about atheists who are still spiritual, or atheists who are still believe that something may happen after death. I mean, obviously not to your body because you rot, right? But like something, with the consciousness or whatnot. And there are atheists who still, fall under the whole more agnostic leaning, but they're not agnostics in the fact, well, I don't know if Jesus is real or not. But maybe not about a certain religion or religions in general, but other things they're very open minded about. Where are you on that spectrum? I mean, if you had to say, like, am I an agnostic atheist? Am I an atheist? I think Richard Dawkins called it he had something in the God delusion, like a scale, like a 7, and then 10 would be completely and totally.
Yeah, I thought it was like a 1 to 7, and
Yeah.
seven's like, I
Oh,
know
okay.
for a fact that there are no gods, and he's like a 6, and I'm probably as close as possible. What is that soap? It's 99, 34,
Mm-hmm.
100th kind of deal. It's pretty close. I mean, the more I read into it, I'm reading some Bart Ehrman books about like early Christianity and the different versions of these books that became, and it's like, here really is nothing there. It's just like a group of books people kind of cobbled together, and I just find less and less reason to believe. I guess this is the main religion that people believe in, so I pay attention to it. But it's just like, I don't know. I see nothing there. I'm intrigued to learn more. Hopefully, I can change my mind if enough evidence comes out. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, not even. I mean, just use Christianity as an example, or but even things like, I don't know. I feel that a lot of atheists embrace the word spiritual like I do. I mean, I'm an English major. I'm an English teacher, so I use words the way they're supposed to be used, and I use words poetically. And also, and there's a lot of dialogue between especially with neuroscience, and maybe there's some sort of something that is beyond, like, I'm not, certainly don't believe that it's a god or a religion is right out there, but that great mystery, what are any great mysteries. Another atheist who is on this channel said to me, well, things we really don't know about, we should probably just be agnostic on. For instance, we don't know for sure, if there probably is things about the universe that we don't know. For example, we can't say for sure that it's out there at all. You know, there there may be some form of bacteria somewhere on Europa. So that's my point. Like, where are you on the spectrum of, as far as being atheist? Is it because I've seen some that everything unknown is no. There's nothing. Just I know. It's almost like the reverse of a fundamentalist, where they think they know that everything else is. They think that they have the answers, whereas maybe a Christian or fundamentalist would think that they have the answers to just different answers, yes and no.
Well, I feel like most religious creeds are trying to teach the certainty about things that we're not certain about, and like have faith. So the question, I guess, is not like, are there things we don't know? Obviously, there's a lot, but can we exhaust everything there is to know about the universe and about our state and all that, and what happens after we die and what happens to us, and maybe if there's a grander cosmic purpose to it all. But the goal is just to keep learning, not say, oh, this guy 2,000 years ago in this book that we don't know what the original words were, that's the person who knew what the truth is.
Yeah.
And we can't question it. We just have to go with it. The whole canned ham thing. Is he actually believe what he believes? Well, I'm convinced that he is.
Yeah. And, I don't know. I don't kind of like, I don't let different segments have different words. Like, I don't like it when one group hijacks a word. I don't like it when religious people hijack the word spiritual, whatnot, but, and I guess that kind of goes more into what, being spiritual can just be appreciating the night sky, or just, whatever brings you joy and makes you feel at peace, and all those moments. They're very spiritual moments. But moving on to, you mentioned earlier about like the whole absence of a lot of, and I didn't even think about this until you brought up a female atheist or women atheist out there. It's a very loaded question, and I've asked it before on forums and stuff, just out of curiosity, not knowing the whole controversy there with some entities out there, some atheist organizations and groups and factions. Why do you think that there are so few visible women in secular organizations, and atheism in particular?
Well, the more I get in, the more people I find, but I don't know if there's this whole theory that, women are supposed to be in charge of the family, so they will lead them toward the church because the church gives them a moral structure and gives their kids daycare and a thing to follow, and they're always kind of pushing guys into it. But if you go to an atheist meetup, I was listening to the anniversary episode of Promoting Secular Feminism, and the reason why they started a show is because they were the two women who showed up to their local atheist group. Because most times I go to a local atheist group, it's like 80% guys. So even just by sheer numbers, that's going to be kind of intimidating. So I don't know how does white guys say women should be, involved in atheism more? Just, you got to be supportive of the people who are out there, and hopefully they can bring more people in, because we can't be a 90% white male kind of thing. That's definitely going to not end well long term. It's going to be like, oh, we're just for these rich, privileged white guys who have the free time and don't have anything at stake. What was it? The air-conditioned atheism. That was a term I heard recently. The people who are pretty comfortable and have something on the line. So, yeah. A couple weeks ago, was it last week? Yeah, I talked to Karen Garst, and she's got a new book coming out, Women Beyond Belief, and it's stories about a bunch of women who have left religion and their stories. And it's like, get the stories out there. That's very important to hear. If you're thinking you're something and you don't hear anybody else who's like you, you're going to stay hidden as long as possible. But if you hear other people's stories, then maybe you'll get to question, you get to be open about it.
And that's important as well. Like what you're doing, getting people's stories out there. I've heard the whole thing like about, women drag guys to church and all that, and church cloisters women, and church, makes sure that women, they're dogmatic and they follow the whole behavior, that structure that they're supposed to do, and they basically, I guess, a life, or well, maybe not so light, a form of Stockholm syndrome. And that may be true in some instances, but I don't buy that. I find that that's a lot of that is a lot of people kind of scapegoating women when religion really hurts women. As far as what I've seen in my reality, I actually see the reverse. Like, I see a lot of I see a lot of women who are forced into religion or kept prisoner in religion by a group think or a group mind. And yeah, sometimes it may be a spouse, but often it's that group mind, like you said, in right to work states. You can lose everything, and I see a lot of, and a lot of it's bullying also by other women, and I do see one discouraging thing that I do see when I see women trying to speak out as secular or atheist or whatever term that they want to cling to or label they feel comfortable with. I do see them sort of being silenced or quieted, whether it's I think I just made a word quieted, whether it's they're talking about atheism in conjunction with something else, a political movement, and I may or may not agree with that, but they're just out there talking. I do see a certain element of I don't even like to call it misogyny, but I guess that's what it is, or chauvinism, because I feel that word's overused. But unfortunately, there's a reason it's overused. I see a lot of that, and I see it from guys and gals. I just don't think it's one or the other. But I don't know if you've seen that same thing as well.
It does happen. Can we just say men are the worst? No, men aren't the worst, but
no, they're not.
They can be. They can be. Yeah, there is a community thing, and if you're going in a certain direction, you want to stick with it, and you're afraid to step out. And usually, if churches are talking, they're not talking. Was it First Timothy? It says women should be silent. They're not going to talk about the negative stuff. They talk about the story of Ruth, or the few stories in the Bible where a woman. And it's odd, as someone who's reading some books about like the early women who actually were big in Christianity, they got it kind of tamped down. I mean, that was a little bit, when I was talking with Karen last week, it was about how Yahweh actually used to have a wife, and then the wife kind of disappeared, and they made this way to like make sure it was an only male religion. But it's the only game in town in Abrahamic land. It's pretty much all male focused religions out there. The female stuff, I mean, maybe Wiccan, and that's not really that big of a group. So
Wiccan,
maybe you should
just everyone
create some goddesses that go back to the Romans and the Greeks and just kill the male gods. And
actually, animism was rather feminine. Yeah, actually, the oldest religions, or not religions, but I guess we could say spiritualities, actually were more feminine. The whole idea of the sacred feminine, and then going back into animism, starting with animism, and you look at all the little Venus, they call them little Venus statues, like figurines that you find in Europe in some bog somewhere, and you look at a lot of the mythology that was kind of usurped into Christianity. So a lot of that was originally feminine. It's really what they call the and I'm getting you can see my occult background coming out, the Age of Pisces, which really ushered in like male-dominated religions. But so that's interesting, and it's interesting that, but we could have this whole dialogue about that. Maybe that's a whole other show that you and I need to do together. But I don't really think, like you said, men are the worst. I don't know. I don't think, I think men have had some help by women as far as holding women down. At least that's what I've seen, to be fair about that, because we don't want to. I can't stand it when the white guy, the typical white guy, gets scapegoat, even though goat, but whatever. Even though there is definitely that that element of the misogynist on the keyboard, just doing whatever he can. But there's also, I think, more factors involved as to why women can't speak out. There's so much to lose, like you said, jobs, children. It's the most horrible thing that can happen to you. So I think there's a lot of different factors there. But yeah, anything else you want to say or talk about, or want to make any statement about? Everyone is always curious about, all my international friends, about American politics. Want to make any statement about that, or talk about any upcoming shows?
Well, I'm very much seat in my pants. So week by week, I'm finding my new guests. So I can't. I don't know, all these people that schedule in advance, weeks and months. I mean, I don't know what they're all about. So yeah, I need to actually find a guest for next week. So I'm still working on that. But yeah, it's every week, and I'm not as stuck on the time as other people are. Like, it's usually for me between Tuesday and Thursday, I'll do a show. I do another show about football on Wednesdays, so I try not to go back to back. I found out that's a bit of a problem, maybe because there's beer involved, but it's interesting to jump back and forth between topics. But yeah, I don't know. I think we're all like America's gonna have a big hangover in November just because it's gonna be over. Because I have friends in Canada and they're like, yeah, we just had our election and it was like 2 months. It was the longest thing ever. And I'm like, we've been doing this for 2 years. It doesn't really matter who made the final cut. It's just, oh gosh. And just the horrible things that are coming up, and just like, oh, people aren't, they're a bunch of assholes in this country. How about that, you know?
Yeah.
And how tenuous is this grasp of society? Like, how close are we to just falling apart all the time? And just somehow it's a miracle that it stays together. Because people, yeah, it's like you said, religion, politics, it tends to fall apart really quickly. So I'm hoping when I do interviews, that's not the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. How's the? Do I dare ask at this late hour how things are going in adoption in Alabama and all that?
Oh,
how
honey,
are you doing? I know.
That's a whole other thing. Let me tell you, it's tomorrow. You know what tomorrow is? It's the argument to see if they actually get to do a retrial. It's a nightmare. And, you know, constitutional law, it's almost like it doesn't exist here. And if this ever hits a federal court, I would be surprised if there are not people in federal prison for human trafficking when it's all said and done. And I'll just leave it at that. It's
Yeah. When you brought the subject of adoption up in my show, it's like, I always get on the religious side, but it's like, that's not something that comes into the wheelhouse very often. And you don't even really think about it and go,
yeah.
You know, I have friends who adopted a kid from like Ethiopia, and they had to go through tons of red tape. But it's yeah, there are situations that don't go well, and at least they temporarily booted Roy Moore, right? Are they going to find a way to get him back?
Yeah, and that's interesting because actually one thing about Roy Moore, he's actually very pro biological families, and he's been which is odd because, you know, you think that he would be against a lot of and a lot of things, you know, like he wouldn't be in support of single motherhood, or he wouldn't have a little bit of empathy. But that is surprising, knowing that and hearing that. So it's and I'm not a fan of Roy Moore. Let's make that very clear. But there are so many variables and so many things that are not seen that some of us know about, that if the average person knew it was going on, I don't think major news outlets would be ignoring it. And I don't think a lot of people would be able to sleep at night. And I'll tell you some things off air.
Okay. It's kind of a tease and kind of not. Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, gosh, we've talked for about an hour, and I just want to thank you for coming on. And anything else you want to say? Anything, you know, you want to do a song and dance? Zachrilege is your channel. It's called the Zachrilege Cast, right?
The show is Zachrilege Cast. Yeah, you can find it on YouTube. It's also on iTunes and some of those podcast catchers. And at Zachrilege, ZACHRILEGE is the Twitter handle I use for this account. So, you know, I'm on Facebook as well. So I'm around. So if you know, want to tell your story, let me know. Or if you just want to listen, give me some feedback. That is good as well. Just want to know how it's going. If, you know, I'm entertaining the masses. I'm entertaining myself, so that's good enough, I guess, for now. And yeah, thanks for having me on. And I feel like it's been a while, and you get like an hour of talking with someone, and you're like, "This is cool." And then a few months later, you go, "I haven't talked to this person at all. I haven't caught up. I don't know how the kiddies are doing." And I gotta stay in touch.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the fun.
And you're very welcome, and thanks for coming on again. And I will have all his links in the description, so please check out Zach's work. He does a good job. Bye, guys. Till next time.
Thanks a lot for having me.